T.J. Hooker returns next week at this time. Now a special presentation.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. It's the nation's second longest running comic convention. It's Ithacon, April 22nd and 23rd at the Campus Center of Ithaca College. Tickets are just $20, $5 for kids 17 and under. Order tickets now at ithacon.org. Featured guests include the legendary Walt and Louise Simonson, DC comic vets Shelley and Philip Bond, Dean Haspiel, Mike Gold, the classic Spider-Man and Superman writer Roger Stern, Megaton Man's Dom Simpson, Star Trek's DS9 J.G. Hertzler, and many more. This year we'll have amazing comic publishers like Ahoy Comics, Dynamite, A Wave Blue World, and SHP. There'll be cosplay contests, panels, kids' activities, and more. Plus, Ithacon is offering swag bags for the first 200 attendees to buy tickets. These overstuffed swag bags offer over $30 value in comics, books, and more. Join us for Ithacon, April 22nd and 23rd at the Campus Center of Ithaca College. Order tickets now at ithacon.org. All right, a little technical difficulty there, but we finally made it. Welcome again to Word Balloon, everybody, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. I have to correct my Ithacon convention commercial for those who are watching rather than listening. It is actually the next weekend. It is April 29th and 30th at Ithaca College. So I'm going to correct that on the video. Scott Shaw doesn't care because he's not involved. Although, all right, good shrug. I can appreciate that. But I'm really happy to welcome Scott Shaw back to Word Balloon. Great to see you, man. How are you?
Thank you very much. You too.
Well, again, we always have great conversations. I've appreciated the fact that Matthew Klickstein has connected us. And, it's you're a font of knowledge for your years in comics and your involvement in San Diego Comic-Con. And I'm grabbing your cover because you released this fantastic collection last year of your works. Where the hell is it? Because I've got so many pages of the thing. There it is. Okay, Scott, hang on a second. We'll pop it up in a second. But this is great. Everyone should really grab this fantastic collection. Scott Shaw's Comics and Stories about fandom, underground comics, culture, everything. My God, and really a great representation of your body of work that continues to impress us and delight us with your comics, man. Well done. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you. It got printed, and I was selling it out at Comic-Con in July last year, but Amazon agreed to let Diamond Distributors handle it, so it actually was out to the comic shops, I think maybe a month ago or so.
Wow. Okay.
So it's really kind of a new book to the comic stores, which is great for me.
Absolutely, man. Well, that's great to hear. And honestly, I'm really curious, Scott, because actually a couple weeks ago, I was listening to National Public Radio, and their show On the Media was talking about the demise of alt newspapers. And you and I know, because we're both from cities that had wonderful alternative newspapers. Here in Chicago, we had the Chicago Reader. I don't know what the free alt newspapers were in San Diego when you were growing up.
Well, there were a couple of them, but I also there was a great store in San Diego. Actually, there was an area where there was the best newsstand in San Diego. That's where I got all my comics from the time I was 5 to until they opened a comic shop in the early 70s. And I still went there because they had everything, paperback books, monster magazines, everything. And they actually convinced him to put my first underground comic up for sale. And I felt like, boy, I'm really important now, but it was a little thing. But around the corner, there was a shop called the Controversial Bookstore. Now, I didn't realize it, but controversial meant that we have nudist magazines in the back room. I didn't notice that at all. I saw the beaded curtain. I just thought, oh, that must be where they just put all their overstock or stuff. But they had every underground newspaper. They had all these, Mao books and Tim Leary's, LSD books and stuff.
Sure.
And it was an underground comics, and it was, and then there was a really great used bookstore it's like I blew my money every day just going up there and because it was all I needed, really. There were some other places in San Diego that were really good too, but that nexus was really important to me. And that's how I would buy the stuff from Berkeley. I because I was fascinated by underground comics, and I was let me see, in 1968 I was 17, so I was the perfect age to be interested in all that stuff.
100%, man. No, I get it. And that culture, we have in Chicago, we still have Quimby's bookstore, which is a terrific alt bookshop, just like you're describing, man. Underground newspapers, magazines, as the zines really became popular and still thrive, at least here in Chicago, and I would imagine in some big cities. But I would think, too, as a cartoonist, there was a great opportunity to submit that stuff at its height. But now, good Lord, I had no idea that the Village Voice, that you could kind of qualify as kind of alternative as far as a newspaper goes, but it's kind of what they call a zombie website. Somebody bought the brand and then immediately gutted the staff. There's only an editor on duty, and they submit, and people submit freelance articles for them. But good Lord, I'm sure this was the case in San Diego. Not only having stores, but we had like newspaper vending machines, and they were free newspapers. Things like the Chicago Reader here in Chicago and stuff, which still thrives and has a staff and everything. But I know they're on life support, and I wonder, as a cartoonist now, are you able to? I noticed some of your stuff in your book would go to free papers like Streetwise, or actually Streetwise does cost, and good, because the money goes to support causes for the homeless and that. But yeah, I wonder. I would imagine. Do you try to submit anything anymore to whatever?
I really don't, because I still work on mainstream comics as well, but then they have people breathing down your neck, and the deadline has to be so and so. So I have to have something to balance it out with stuff that I control. Before we go on, though, I have to tell you a very funny story about underground comics sellers. My dad got me a job at the San Diego Zoo because he was the chief of security. This was when I was in college. So out in front of the zoo, out in front of the entrance, there were some kids a little older than me selling underground newspapers and underground comics. And I went out there and I was talking to them and bought a lot of the stuff from them. And they said, this one guy comes in and rousts us, and she described my dad. So I started talking to my dad, and I hear that, you've got a schedule, right? And so where do you go? When do you go? I went out there and told them what his schedule was, and just to pack up for a half hour and then come back. They were giving me comics after that. I ratted out my own father for underground comics.
Your dad was the man. Who knew? That sucks.
Well, it's really embarrassing to him too, is he kind of had to dress up like a ranger, except he looked much more like that guy in those, I think they were Ford commercials, where it was, this really ugly, angry Southern cop, and it was like, That didn't work out for him. People were really mean to him. He was a very nice guy, but
Did he? I mean, how much of your success did he see, and did he kind of come to terms with? Well, my son is a cartoonist and doing not subversive, but satirical stuff.
My dad joined the Navy thinking he was going to go see the world. He grew up in Decatur, Illinois. Both of my parents were from Decatur.
Okay.
And let me put this in order here. He understood that I like to draw, and I could never figure this out. And he would we put in ads in the San Diego paper, trying to get kids interested in reading the paper, gave us free classified ads. And I would put in, I'm looking for comic books, contact Bruce Wayne, contact Reed Richards. And nobody, except insiders, even knew who I was talking about. But I had all these different identities, and he'd drive me all around San Diego to buy comics before it was back when, okay, 3 for a dime if they're used, 7 for a quarter, I think. And I really got an incredible experience because I was seeing people, the closer to the border I got, into Mexico, the poorer the families were, and they had the most comic books.
Interesting.
And it really rattled me because, I went into houses where they didn't even have a floor. It was just dirt inside. And it really opened me up to realize you've got a good life because you're a white guy whose father is an officer in the Navy. He was a lieutenant commander when he retired before he went to the zoo. And so thinking about him more, he always obsessed on telling me how to letter. And I am convinced, especially after his funeral, when I talked to some of his old pals, he hadn't had his ship blown over in Pearl Harbor, he was a Pearl Harbor survivor and almost burned up in the fire on the fuel on top of the water.
Wow.
He wound up in the Navy, and he didn't do anything else but that for 25 years. But I am convinced that if it wasn't like that, the alternate universe kind of thing, that he would have gone back after he served his time, gone back to Decatur and been a sign painter. Because when I was really little, he taught me how to draw a biplane. He also taught me pretty young how to draw a profile of a naked woman. And that helped me. I made money on that at school.
Sure.
I also made money on surfers and monsters and stuff. I remember by the time I was in 6th grade, I had a rate. If you want a headshot of the Wolfman or a surfer, that's 3 cents. But if you want the whole figure, it's 5 cents. And I was using the money to buy more comics because that's how I was teaching myself how to write and draw. And my dad kind of laughed at it and called it nonsense, but he never said I couldn't do it. The one time he took everything away from me was when I got a bad grade and corrected it on the report so I didn't get in trouble. On that. So he took my comic collection, which at the time filled a big trunk, and he put it up in the top of the garage so I couldn't reach it. Well, I could reach it. Again, comics, hey, I'll do anything. I wasn't reading them, but I was still buying them and putting the new issues in there. And when he finally said, okay, well, you can have them again, I remember hearing him complain to my mom, Jesus Christ, this thing's a lot heavier than I remembered.
Outstanding.
So I had a dad that kind of was into it without ever admitting to it.
That's beautiful, man. That's outstanding. That's a progressive dad teaching you how to draw a naked woman, for God's sake.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And I think every cartoonist sooner or later has to draw something like that anyway.
That's beautiful.
When my first wife threw me out, I needed money fast, and I knew a guy that had a lot to do with X-rated movies and stuff. And he said, "Oh, this company will pay $25 for every picture." So I called him up, and I thought it was a gimmick, and I said, "Do I have to put a background? Do they have to be a gag?" "No, we just want women with extremely large breasts and without a top on." And I thought, well, that's really nothing I really ever drew, but sure. I think I made enough money because I was living with Mark Evanier, and I really needed to get out of there. Well, I mean, Mark had a life and I had a life, and suddenly it's like the Odd Couple with two Felixes. And you know, I think he was as relieved as I was. But anyway, it was enough to cover an apartment and everything, so I was fine after that. But you look around, you talk to cartoonists, and sooner or later we're in trouble. Okay, I'll draw whatever you want as long as I can get the money by so and so, because I'm in big trouble. And I think that's been the way cartoonists have been since somebody drew something on a wall, you know, of their cave.
Guerrilla cartooning, absolutely. Yeah. Jason wants to let you know Captain Carrot was my favorite comic growing up, an underrated DC gem, certainly among Scott's greatest hits, if you will.
Yeah, so, thanks. DC doesn't seem to know what to do with Captain Carrot. They really want to have him out there, but they have nobody with a sense of humor there anymore. So they have to make him into a badass, threatening character. I'm going to have an action figure coming out very soon that I didn't approve, but it's called Captain Carrot. It looks like a monster, but I told him, I said, well, I'm still getting paid for this, right? Oh yeah. It's like,
well, that's good. Truly.
Yeah, that's good, but it's embarrassing because I don't understand why they can't realize that cartoony characters can be just as popular as superheroes. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, here's your greatest hits, and right there.
Yeah, that's kind of a good lineup of things I've worked on. Yeah.
Yeah, Jesus, man. I mean, truly, and I didn't realize until I was prepping to talk to you the first time, and you could see in the center, just to the left of Fred Flintstone, there's Ed Grimley, and just to the right of Homer Simpson, there's John Candy from Camp Candy. And I didn't know at the time that these were Scott Shaw jams. And that's
I produced both series. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, really, everybody, just for the video audience, look at all the different characters there. It's a wonderful collection of original and licensed characters that Scott has worked with over the years. I hear what you're saying about Captain Carrot, because I want to say Jim Starlin or somebody, if not Jim, somebody.
No, I don't think he's ever drawn him, but they keep reinventing him. There, a few years ago, they had him as a space pirate called Captain K-Rot.
Right.
And he's a hard drinking, sex loving guy. And I'm like, really? Is that all you can come up with? Why don't you just call me and say, hey, we want to make something funny that kids will like and adults will like as well. But yeah. And the most ironic thing was they came to me because they wanted to have something that they could sell as an animated series. So I did them really simple. And then they had Joe Orlando come and say, here, you got to put more muscles on him. You got to put more studs on him. That's more superhero. And that's what it wound up being. And then it took me so long to draw this stuff. They wanted it to all look like, what if George Perez was drawing funny animals? It was like, how about Scott Shaw drawing funny animals? And I just couldn't keep up with the schedule after a while. That's why I was just writing it and inking it at times. And finally, I just said, I need to get a job that pays me, because they kept saying, in the next issue, we'll pay you more, like dangling a carrot. And it was like, there was no carrot for Captain Carrot.
For Captain Carrot, absolutely. That's crazy, man.
But that's typical comics in general. The thing you showed that picture of my career thing. The thing that I'm probably most known for now is that I drew the first Sonic the Hedgehog comic. Now, that was certainly overground stuff, but
sure.
But I always have kind of a little underground vibe, I guess, unless I'm drawing the Flintstones or something like that. But yeah, it's very strange that the world of comics doesn't really absorb the fact that humor is also out there. And I'm not talking about verbal humor. I'm talking about funny stuff going on. They had a new Flintstones comic back when, 3 or 4 years ago, when DC was probably told, revive Hanna-Barbera or else. And they came up with all these kind of irritating gimmicks. Oh, we're going to have them. I think they did it with the Warner Brothers characters too, because it was all Warner's. DC is all Warner's anyway.
Right.
but they had new versions of the characters that were so unlikable. And the Flintstone one was written pretty well. It was trying to be contemporary, but they drew them like they're real people, like the movies that everybody hated. And I'm thinking, why do you think that everybody is looking for reality? I mean, yeah, there's plenty of it, but it's like, how about something fun? No, the world, every issue is connected because the world is dying. That's the main thing both the companies are doing now. It's like,
well, yeah.
But of course, in my opinion, marketing has destroyed society in general. It's like, hey, the next issue, the next movie, the next TV show, the next concert. It's like, and then you're going, well, it's okay. Oh no, but next week we have so and so, and it's like white noise.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
And unless you're picky, you're just, you're kind of let down all the time because none of it's that great. But they're spending so much money on promotion that they want everybody to think everything's wonderful in a society that's going down the drain. It's like, I don't get it.
It's the people in charge just consider it another product.
Absolutely.
And they don't realize it needs a brain and a heart to really connect with people. And God, I'm a lifelong Star Trek fan. And what passes today for Star Trek is so embarrassingly bad. And we've seen the frustrations of fans of DC and Marvel stuff. And I mean, Marvel had a nice run up until, 2018 or so. And it seems now they can't get out of their own way to make something entertaining as far as the movies go. DC keeps trying. And I've got faith because it's James Gunn. And I did really love those Guardians movies. And I like the Peacekeeper show. So,
we will see when the big face-off between Superman and Fantastic Four. And I got to tell you, I don't buy many comics anymore, but I will buy the FF until I die. Those were the characters. I mean, I was reading typically like people our age. You start out reading funny books with animated characters for the most part.
Sure.
And I didn't. The difference between me and most people is then I started reading the Mort Weisinger Superman titles, but I was still buying the funny stuff. And then I went to Marvel, and I was still buying some of the DC and still buying some of the funny stuff. And I remember by the high school, people were making fun of me for collecting Carl Barks stuff. And I said, you're out of your mind. He's one of the greatest guys that ever worked in comics. And Sugar and Spike, yes. Do you know who does that comic? That's great. And by the way, Little Lulu, those are some of the funniest comics ever made. And it's like people are looking at me like I'm an alien. And now people finally admit, yes, that was great stuff. And there's a lot of other great stuff out there that people deserve to see. That, I mentioned Carl Barks, but there were a lot of people out there that wrote and drew stuff themselves that never got a lot of attention for it. And another guy is Bob Bowling on those original Little Archie comics. There's gravitas to those that the teenage stuff never has.
I completely agree with you, man, and especially a lot of the Little Archie stuff, 100%. I'll admit, and I don't know how you felt about this. Maybe you liked it. But the one comic that tried to be funny to me and the art was just too rough and I couldn't get into it was Sad Sack. And I don't know how you felt about Sad Sack.
I looking back, I didn't really particularly like it. I remember being in the PXs at the Marine Corps Depot and all 9 Navy bases in San Diego, and there will all be sailors standing in front of me. Get me? Then later all kids are standing in front of me. Where do they get out of the way? But yeah, I wasn't crazy about them. The funny thing is I've collected a lot of them because George Baker, the guy that created Sad Sack, did most of the covers. About a third of them have somebody with their butt on fire. That was his go-to gag.
Okay, I absolutely, man. No, I hear you. Oh, it's great.
Sad Sack comic where it's after the war and he's trying to work as a civilian. And I've never seen anybody pull that. And so I bought that because my dad happened to him. I want to read about that.
Sure. I want to acknowledge because I know he's like your spiritual son when it comes to his brand of comics. Art Baltazar is watching,
Oh,
and
hi, Art.
he's prepping this coming up next week. We've got our Chicago convention C2E2. So now
Oh,
we're right.
that's a show that I really want to go to sometime. That's a big goal for me.
Oh, I hope, man. I certainly hope so, Scott. Because truly, it's been tough for me to come up with the scratch to go to San Diego the last couple of years, and so I haven't been able to meet you face to face. And I'm really glad we've had these opportunities to talk via StreamYard and everything. But God, it would be wonderful if you came to Chicago.
I've got so many friends in Chicago, and cartoonists and people from the Svengoolie show. So that's why I'd really love to be there, because I really want to meet Rich Coase face to face. We've
Oh my
talked,
God,
worked on stuff a lot, but we've never actually had the
Oh,
same air.
good
Yeah.
Lord. Well, here's an irony. I am moderating Rich's panel next weekend.
Oh, good for you. Good
I
for
have
you.
been oh my God, it's truly, Scott, growing up, and I even remember he moved to San Diego, actually. The original Svengoolie, Jerry
Oh
G.
yeah, I didn't know that was him, but I watched the show. He had Sun Up. He had the morning show. Yeah, the guy that played the hippie version of
Exactly. And no, I've watched Rich since he started back in '79, and it was such an honor when he first asked me, "Hey, you want to moderate my panel?" This is a couple of years ago, and I do it every year. And I'm always like, Rich, if there's a fan or another friend that you'd like, he's like, "Oh no, John, you know my career, and you know the right questions to ask." He goes, "We got a good chemistry. Please keep doing it." I'm like, it's my honor, my God. And he fills the room. He's a rock star. And I'm so proud that he's now nationally syndicated.
Oh yeah, and he absolutely knows how to pull it off. He kind of borrows different segments from all the different what certain people did way in the past. He shows off his ability to draw on camera, which is really hard to do. He's really good at that. And it must have been 5 or 6 years ago, but when I was in the hospital, actually, that's when I first watched him. And what really gets me, and I saw this one time, he and his producer Jim Roach were at the end of one of those riffing things with the guys that played the mad scientists on Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yeah.
Invited him in, and literally I was talking to the screen thinking I was with my pals, because it was exactly like being with my friends in LA, Floyd Norman and Sergio Aragonis and all these different cartoonists. We used to get together at lunch on Fridays, and it was the same thing. And they would look at the camera once and go, "If you're under 40, don't worry, we're talking about old stuff." And it was like, I love you on screen, but now I love you even more, because it's like we're brothers. And I got to tell you, when I was a kid, I obviously wanted to be a cartoonist. I also wanted to be a paleontologist. And then the Flintstones came out. It was like, well, I could do both and not have to go out in the Gobi Desert. That might be good. But I also wanted to either be a kid show host or a horror host, not realizing that there was absolutely no money in that. They usually say, "Okay, well, the gaffer over there, he's a funny guy. We'll give him another $25 in his envelope every week if he can just write and draw and come up with great ideas." It's like,
No, you're right, man. In fact, God, we just lost Joe Flaherty from SCTV.
Oh man, and I worked with him.
Oh my God! Well, did he do?
Yeah, because he was part of the
show?
Family Show. We wanted Count Floyd, and he was a live segment that he would show a cartoon, a 2-minute cartoon, and I already just absolutely loved SCTV from the get-go. To me, it's the funniest show ever made. But hanging out with him, we got him into LA for I think 3 or 4 days so we could shoot all the segments. So he's coming over to me and my friend Don Doherty and Kent Melton, who died a few weeks ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And, he wasn't putting on. He liked to talk about old monster movies with us. Now, maybe he did that with people he just didn't know, but it was like being with an old pal. When you meet people like that, you feel like, didn't we go to high school together? because my friends in high school, we were the guys that created Comic Con, or at least certainly half of the people. And I was very lucky to be in a high school where there were a lot of weirdos who wound up being successful weirdos, you know? So
well, I'll tell you, there are collaborations with you and Don in the book, and then also so many great images that you created for Comic Con. And here's a classic example of that. And
I've been meaning to do an update on that because 89 seems like a long time ago. I need to do the 72-year-old Scott Shaw.
Indeed, absolutely. Well, you got the hair still, thank God. Not as much of a buzz cut as this image, but
this is just because I haven't been able to get to my my driver, I'm my barber. But now that I'm driving, I'm going out actually on Saturday, and I'll look like have my buzz cut back.
There you go, man. That's excellent. No, but I know what you mean, man, because truly that's one of the ways Rich Koz and I connect. You know, Rich did radio before he and actually did it with Jerry G. Bishop, and other great radio people in the 70s before he created the Son of Svengoolie. And I always tell him, like, you had the career, just like you said, you had the career I wanted, man. I wanted to be a goofy guy on the radio that did funny bits. I was able to do that on my sports radio station. But yeah, I'm like, oh, I'd love to be a kids host or a horror movie host. But you're right, it really was that kind of thing. And Count Floyd, my God, he nailed it. I mean, I don't know who was in Pittsburgh when Joe was growing up to be his model for those great things. But every big city had, that kind of weekend horror movie host.
The greatest thing about Joe, and it wasn't just as Count Floyd, it was all of his characters, really. He didn't even, of course, off camera, he didn't act like an actor either, but he also didn't act like an actor on screen. His best thing was that kind of looking and then kind of getting out of it. Like, he's like, oh shit, the camera's on. Oh, I can't, it's like, it was, that was look, I absolutely love John Candy. I have known a lot of celebrities, but by far, John was the guy that I still weep when I see some of his movies because he deserved to be on this planet a lot more.
Hell yeah.
But same with Joe. I mean, they both just crack me up. But there's nobody on that. I actually got to work in one way or another with every major person on SCTV except for Harold Ramis.
Wow.
Between John Candy's show and the Ed Grimley show, and then I did some work on the Mackenzie Brothers show directly for Dave. And for a while there, I was known as the guy that does the SCTV funny stuff, the cartoons, which was just a wonderful thing.
Absolutely, man.
I just wish that we'd had more time, and because both shows were picked up at the last minute, we had to design them overnight practically. They were getting sent. The first few episodes of Ed Grimley went to 3 different studios in Asia, and it was like a nightmare. It was like, and sometimes you don't get the footage maybe 2 days before it had to air, so you couldn't do any retakes.
God, you should go to the Surviving SCTV people, because good Lord, Edith Prickly, Andrea Martin's character, would make an amazing cartoon character. All of them. And, I've had the pleasure of doing interview shows on television years and years ago. When Analyze This came out, we had our talk show that was a spinoff of our sports radio show. And we had Harold Ramis on, and it was just fantastic. But Dave Thomas was on just a couple of years ago. He co-wrote that science fiction comedy adventure story with Max Allen Collins. And I had this on.
I haven't heard about that.
Oh, I'll send you the link to my interview with him, because really the first 40 minutes we're just talking about his Superman comic book collection. It was fantastic.
No kidding, man. He had a party after we got the show rolling, and he said, I want to show you something. And he took me up to his bedroom, and I'm like, it's Hollywood. And and he opens up his closet, and there is his Superman uniform made specifically for him. And then he pulls out a long box that is beautifully lacquered wood. And he said, yeah, I made that in the shop when I was in high school. and he had the most perfect issues of the Weisinger Superman stuff I've ever seen. I said, and he showed me annual number 1, and it was just like, it was like, the binding is, I said, this looks like it came off the rack yesterday. He said, I would go down to the newsman like 5 a.m. when I knew the comics were coming, and I'd ask him, if I can help you unload these, can I pick? And he still had to pay for them. Can I pick the freshest copies? And I thought, man, I wish I'd been that smart. They didn't do that at the Navy PXs, I'll tell you. And I certainly didn't want to get drafted. My dad once told me, he said, you don't want to get drafted. I said, yeah, Dad, I know. He goes, no. He says, and my dad loved me, but he was being honest. He said, you won't fit in. You won't fit in. And at boot camp, somebody will come over with a little envelope and they'll say, I'm sorry, but there was an accident and your son is dead.
Oh, God.
He says,
my
you
God.
can't shut up, and they will shoot you in the head just to shut you up. And he's right.
Oh, my God. I was expecting more of the 4F. And like, yeah, maybe the Army doesn't need you, Mr. Shaw. It's time to go.
No, he knew that I was a weirdo, and then I couldn't change.
Michael says he loved SCTV more than SNL. Still feel that way. Well, listen, it's hard to be live and do perfection. And the great thing about SCTV, as Scott knows, you do it until you get it right on video. You can edit, you can retake and everything. And those guys I know worked really, really hard for those sketches and doing them on a shoestring. I mean, I interviewed or I had dinner with Harold, and we were talking about, he said, we used to go to Woolworths to get our props. That's how cheap we were.
Oh, that first season, all they really seem to have is a slate.
But that's great because they were parodying local television and they had the same trappings as local television. So it just made it that much more funnier. It used to, I'm sure the same thing in San Diego. It used to run, and maybe LA as well. It used to run after Saturday Night Live. So we get 90 minutes of Saturday Night Live, then we get a half hour of SCTV.
I was up in LA at that time, but yeah, that was how it was done. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God.
But the other major thing about the difference to me is that they created Melonville, which was a whole, I'm watching and going, who are these people supposed to be parodies of? And then after about 3 episodes, I thought, no, these are characters that aren't based on anybody. These are characters these people thought up. And that was the best thing about it to me.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, long after Camp Candy, John and I were still friends. I pitched him something that he really wanted to do. Was a special called Halloween Candy. And I wanted to get like in the middle of it, Dave Thomas coming in, like Bob Hope is interrupting the special and all that stuff. And then the last time I saw John, trying to think, John Hughes and John and I had a meeting, and they wanted me to produce and direct animated shorts with real animation, not Deke style animation, and before every one of John's movies.
Wow.
And then John went and made Wagons East.
That was the last one? Yeah.
Well, that was the last one. Yeah.
God, somebody ran on cable. They reran Armed and Dangerous the other night, and I still love that. Him and Eugene Levy, and even Going Berserk, which is not that's one of those classic 70s 80s movies that it's certainly not a perfect movie, but there's a lot of really funny stuff in it. I really like it.
John hated a lot of movies that I liked. Because it's like I'd compliment and say, no, that was a piece of crap. It was like, oh, well, okay, if you think so, you know better than me.
Now, Scott, you'll forgive me because before I forget, I wanted to know if you had any great stories about Trina Robbins as we talk about underground comics. And one of the best, man. And yeah, it breaks my heart that we lost her as recently as we have.
Yeah, she was a very special person, that's for sure. I had, reading underground comics, I read her stuff when they were still in the underground papers. But I first met her at Comic-Con early on. And at the time, I was kind of shocked, but I still remembered as being really kind of historical. Beetle Bailey's creator,
Mort Walker.
Mort Walker. And he was on a panel. And she stands up at some point after they're asking, anybody asking him questions. And she pretty much attacked him for all the sexist stuff with General Half-Track's secretary.
Miss Buxley.
Yes, Miss Buxley. And,
exactly.
Yeah. And she really went after him. And everybody was kind of like, whoa. And Mort, who's no longer with us,
right,
is one of my big influences. And we weren't pals, but I talked to him many times. And I thought at the time, Trina, you don't know that this guy has no idea why you're angry at him. He's from a different world. He's a golfer. He likes to have a few drinks. He is in that era. And he's in the newspapers. I mean, that's what people like to read. And I could understand her anger.
Sure.
But at the time, I thought, I don't know. Now I really respect it because she was, you got to stand up against people, especially now. And I always, I'm not somebody that backs off on things either, as you can tell. My mouth goes, wait, my opinions go way too hard. So I loved it. And we became friends, and we get together. We'd have, with her partner, Steve Lealo, we'd have a lot of meals together and stuff. But when I was a lot bigger, I used to weigh over 400 pounds. She'd come up and hug me, and then she'd go, I like to hug you, but not when you're so moist. After I lost my weight, she was like, this is much better. Now not only can I get my arms around you, but you don't feel like you just came out of the sauna.
I have to acknowledge a great thing that Mort Walker did, because they used to, as I'm sure you already know, they used to censor when Miss Buxley would be in a bathing suit, or just any girls in a Beetle Bailey thing that had bikinis on. They would make him take out the navels, and with an X-Acto knife or whatever. And finally, as a comeback, in the background of whoever office it was, the colonel's or the sergeant's office, there was a box of navel oranges, and there was a label for them, and there were all these girls in bikinis, navel oranges and stuff. So
by the way, I have a bootleg one here. I'm selling this for $30 right now.
Fantastic. That's awesome. No, it's my great regret that I never had Trina on the show. I had a few conversations with her and Steve after con, sitting in the Hyatt in a couple comfortable chairs, them sitting down and me talking to them for a few minutes. And yeah, man, she's a genius. So my heart goes out to Steve. He's a really good guy.
I'll tell you, her own stories were brilliant, but she did. After a while, she decided she wanted to write books more than just draw them.
Yes.
And some of those books she's done on different female cartoonists are outstanding.
Yes. The untold stories of a lot of great, because we do. You're right about that, Scott. We forget that really, truly through the decades, and we lost, of course, Ramona Fraden earlier this year too, but it wasn't like they were lone women. There were other really important women. Of course, Marie Severin comes to mind immediately, and others. And I forget the name of the woman that created Ms. Fury or Miss Fury from the 40s and stuff. Mm-hmm. No, and it's important. And yeah, man, she did a great job and truly was a historian, making sure that those stories didn't go untold. So yeah. She was great.
When I was a kid, I didn't know who any of the artists were because they didn't have names on them, except with Marika on Brand X.
Right.
But I remember I just loved Ramona's Aquaman. I just loved it because it really, she didn't do the version Nick Cardy did where it's like, and this is what it's like to really be underwater. You can't see something in the distance. No, it's like she had all these books about fish and undersea stuff, and she knew that kids just wanted to see as much of that crammed into a panel as possible without looking ridiculous. And her style, I once asked her, I said, was Will Eisner a big influence on you? She goes, no. I said, who was your biggest influence? She said, E.C. Segar.
Wow.
I said, why didn't you, when you were at DC, why didn't you ask on doing some of the humor books like Bob Hope or something? You'd be perfect for that. She goes, they never asked me. And at DC, if you asked to go over to another editor, nobody wanted you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. You know, it's funny you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned the Bob Hope books. I meant to tell you earlier, Paul Kupperberg kind of went to them recently and said, you ought to do an omnibus of the Jerry Lewis stuff. And he talked to Jerry's, it was when Jerry was still alive, and then possibly right after he passed, talking to one of his sons, and they didn't want it.
You know
They
what I think
didn't want it.
DC should do? DC had the rights to Dobie Gillis. I have a lot of those Dobie Gillis comics. Then in the 70s, late 60s, they had somebody put some beards and new hair and stuff, and they were Windy and Willie. So I think you could get those, and it wouldn't take much effort. What if they weren't Jerry Lewis comics? What if they were Adam Sandler comics?
Funny.
Almost the same character.
Pretty much.
Yep.
Interesting. Wow. That's a hell of an idea. I love that.
Well,
Jesus.
Sandler likes to make money, and maybe he'd rewrite some of them so they were funnier.
Well, frankly, Scott, and listen, I hear what you're saying regarding the newer Flintstone thing, because at first Steve Pugh's art put me off to even read them, but then I read them, and Mark Russell, the writer, I really think he had some great satirical ideas. And I don't know if you'd ever want to collaborate with a guy like Mark, but and then even in fact,
I'd be happy to collaborate him if he wanted something that looked funny instead of realistic. Yeah.
Well, and you'd likely want it to be more on model, and that's the thing, and that's what put me off initially. And again, I give it up to Steve Pugh because they are funny books, but you're right, they had that John Goodman Flintstone movie vibe, which I hated, and I'm like, yeah, sorry, you guys really missed the point. I hope Joe Barbera made a shitload of money, but other than that,
that's what they were there for.
Did you interact at all with Barbera at the time that you were
very
doing?
Closely. I worked very closely with Bill and Joe.
Please tell me about that, because
this is interesting to me. I never really realized it until I got this old. The first Flintstones episode came out in September 30th, 1960.
Okay.
They had been promoting it enough as what if the Flintstones were the honeymooners? Hanna-Barbera was happy to say that then until Jackie Gleason decided he might want to sue them. And then his manager said, no, kids will hate you for that. But anyway, that was 1960. That's when I sat in front of the TV and got about as even closer than I am to the screen here and whispered after the first episode. We had in black and white because they were made in color, but we didn't know that. And I looked and I'd already loved Rocky and Bullwinkle. I wasn't just it was Jay Ward as much as Hanna-Barbera, but I leaned toward that TV and I whispered, I said, that's what I'm going to do. 16 years later, thanks to Mark Evanier, I was drawing the Flintstone or inking the Flintstone comics. And that led to me working at Hanna-Barbera. They called me and they said, we like your work. Would you like to come in? And I said, well, I kind of like freelancing. I like working in my underwear. I like that, I do want to punch a card. And they said, well, we're working on a new Flintstone series. I said, when do I start?
Wow. Because I know you mostly from the Pebbles, the Fruity and Cocoa Pebbles cartoons.
Yeah, those didn't go through H&B whatsoever. I worked for an agency on that and had the ability to choose what studio I wanted to work with. And fortunately, I had a letter from Bill Hanna that said, if Scott Shaw's working on it, it's approved. And in advertising, they wait for the very last minute on everything, right? And I was writing them as well as, doing all the boards and the designs, and overseeing the whole thing. And when I started there, it was kind of a floundering thing. I think I never knew this, but the agency would get a grade from their clients every year. And it was getting a C because sales it didn't seem to be affecting sales. When they asked me to start working on them, my feeling was kids already know the serial. What they don't want to do is watch something for 40 or 50 times over that isn't funny. We need to give these an actual gag, and they need to be more contemporary. And so with friends working in all the studios, the same week the Lion King's ads were coming out, My Pebble cereal with Barney as King of the Jungle, dressed up as the lion, was coming out. I did a bunch of them parodies of Disney properties because they were, most of them were things that, were public domain anyway. And okay, he's not the Lion King, but he's in a lion suit. That's enough. But everything shot up, and I started getting bonuses without any explanation from Post Serial. And I wound up designing the boxes, and I designed the premiums going inside the boxes and doing the comic book ads. And then they didn't need me anymore because I didn't know this, but Post sold the brand, all their kids' brands, to the same outfit, Ralston Purina, the same people that make dog food.
Yeah, that should tell you a lot. Exactly. Jesus Christ.
And now because you have to pay to get your product on the certain shelf, they're now on the bottom shelf, and they don't do commercials anymore.
Wow, I had no idea. I would imagine that
you're right. They managed to do something. They're very smart in a weird way. Now there's about at least a dozen different products with Pebble cereal. They have Pebble cereal syrup now, Pebble cereal ice cream, cookies. It's like they had a whole different idea. Let's take this dying brand and build it up so we have all these different versions, and that will still make more money that way. And they probably are.
Probably. Yeah. I wonder for your inspiration for making funny commercials for Pebbles and stuff. And again, you just said your love for Jay Ward. Again, growing up, man, late 60s, early 70s, those Captain Crunch cartoons were as funny as the Rocky and Bullwinkle stuff.
Absolutely. And you know what's really ironic? When I was in 11th grade, even though I'd never had any art classes except one in 7th grade in the summer school, in the 11th grade, I was given the assignment to be the assistant to the teacher at my junior high school, who happened to be the same teacher I had, and I was her assistant. And one of the other art teachers was the divorced wife of a guy that worked at Jay Ward.
Wow.
And she wanted to send, she looked at my sketchbook. She says, could I send this to somebody? A few weeks later, I get a mail from Jay Ward Studios wanting to know if I want to intern.
Oh my God.
Well, I'm not in the same city, and I'm not even out of high school. And my parents said, we'd love you to do it, but we really can't move so you can have a job that doesn't pay you. But the stupidest thing was when I moved to LA, I don't know where that letter was. And I thought, if I go up to them and tell them that, they're just going to think I'm full of crap. I never did get to work on Jay Ward stuff, except Universal hired me to do one of those expensive cells of Rocky and Bullwinkle. And I said, after I had it done, stupidly, I didn't make the deal ahead of time. I said, I think I got $300 for doing it, which was really low.
Yeah.
But I had other jobs. So I said, okay. Then I said, can I get one for myself? No, you'll have to buy one. Well, how much are they? $400.
Jesus Christ.
And I'm not buying one.
You can draw your own after that.
Yeah,
what the hell, man?
Yeah.
Now that's really interesting. Yeah. So those are those, like, because I know Chuck Jones did them for Warner's and stuff. And even my cousin, I think, bought one of those. I don't know if it was a real cell from a real cartoon, or more likely it was something that was made, mass produced to sell.
Friz Freeling asked me if I wanted to ghost draw a bunch of Pink Panther cells for him to sign. And knowing his relationship with other cartoonists, where he'd say things like, this looks like crap, you got to do it this way. And then he'd come back and they'd change it and go, what idiot told you to do that? That he was really like, the older he got, the crazier he got. And I thought, I'd really rather enjoy your cartoons and avoid having those kind of relationships. I didn't tell that to him. It was through a second party, but I thought, I feel dirty doing something like that.
No, I get it, man. All right, I want to show a couple more images from the book, and also I wanted you to talk about the other book that you sent as well. And I'm sorry I didn't bring up the.
We aren't talking about this stuff too much, so we gotta promote it. Come on, crack that whip.
All right, I understand. All right, Mr. Devo, I respect that. But yeah, I love this. The Jetsons, of course.
There's Huckleberry Hound as Jack Webb.
Yes. And there are several pages of more of Huckleberry Hound kind of.
And I did these at night when I was working at HB.
Oh my God, that's great. And then also, we talked off the air about this. Neil Adams told me to give it up, and this is such a great. There's a whole section of autobiographical vignettes that you put in the book as well.
Yeah, I'm working on a lot more of them too. They're fun.
That's great, man. All right, listen. With the time left, I do want to talk, and forgive me, Scott, because my brain is jumbled right now, and I don't have images to show right now.
I have that effect on people.
Well, God bless you, because seriously, every tangent that we've had today has just been fantastic, and this is why I love talking to you every time you're on, because we always get great stories out of you. Tell me about the other book, though, please.
Well, it's a 21-page story. It's about experiences based on nurses telling me stories without attributing it to specific patients, because for about 3 years I was needed somebody to come almost every day to help me when I was trying to keep my foot. And I shattered my ankle, and there were a lot of problems, and ultimately I had to remove it. But I made friends with a lot of nurses, mostly women, who once they realized I wasn't a creep and was friendly and funny, I wasn't a problem patient, so they'd reveal things to me. So I, laying there, I thought I gotta get something out of this experience other than just, a fake foot. So I figured, well, my best nurse also told the best stories, but all the nurses told me the same story. There's always, no matter what you're doing, there's always an old man who will do anything to get naked, even if you're there to take their blood pressure. But that was the most lurid one. So I thought I have to put that in there. But I also wanted to talk about what it's like to have a job where you have to walk into 4 or 5 houses, sometimes for the first time, and you have no idea what you're walking into. And as many of them told me, they aren't going to change their behavior or system or the condition of their house for a second. You're just there to do a job, and they want to get you out of there. So I've got people who live in houses that are full of vermin. And I did one with somebody who I couldn't do a religious cult because that's one of the things that kept coming up. And I thought, if no matter what I do, people are going to be mad. So I thought I'll do it about UFO cultists. That's a little not quite as controversial.
Sure.
But I kind of took note of all the different styles of homes around LA and tried to imitate them, because sometimes they have to drive from one side almost all the way to the other. It's like depending on the company, they really have a rough time. So that's what I thought I'd do. And it's kind of a day in the life. Early on, the nurse has a problem with her car. So then she not only is late with all of her patients, and being, bugged by her bosses constantly, but now she has to take a lift. And the other thing that I always I asked, and I finally found, I always wonder, why do people in medicine smoke so much? Don't they know it's killing them? And she said, look, they test you for alcohol. They test you for drugs. What else are you going to do to blow off the pressure?
The stress, yeah.
And so I've got that in the thing. She finally finds a guy, a Lyft driver that smokes, so she can finally have a smoke between things. It's like I've put a lot of stuff in there that's really based on truth, and I just amp it up a little so it's either more funny or a little more sad or whatever. I mean, it's kind of a she meets early on. She meets a guy that had an injury, and he's got a big cleft in the side of his head. This is a story somebody told me, and she's there to change the dressing on his head. But
sure.
When she gets into this place that looks like a prison, she gets into his apartment, and he's got a big photo on the wall of him and all of his pals in the prison yard when they're in prison together. He's a very macho guy, and he's Latino. So he's hitting on her the whole time, but not in a creepy way as much as he kind of still thinks he's that suave guy when he was younger that didn't have the big hole in his head. So she's actually really nice to him. And she's like, I wanted to get the hell out of there, but at the same time, I felt bad for this guy.
Sure.
So, I kind of make it a roller coaster of funny and then sad and then weird. And that's what their lives are like.
What's the title of the book again?
It's based on a preschool in Burbank called Kilgore Children's School, and I thought that is the grimmest name for a kid's school. So it's Kilgore Home Nursing, and it's available online. I will have it as a physical book in a few months, but you can see it. It's for a very small subscription on a site called let me get it here, Aces Weekly.
Oh, sure. That's David Lloyd's company.
David Lloyd's site.
Yes. Oh, my
so
God.
The entire thing is up now and ready for reading.
That's terrific. Seriously, on the one hand, I'm bummed that David doesn't draw anymore because I've always been, for people who don't know, and I'm sure they do if they're Word Balloon fans, V for Vendetta, his great work with Alan Moore. Absolutely. But I'm so glad he started Aces Weekly, and it seems to still be going on in a positive way because I always worry about these digital-only things. And I'm so glad that the last thing I expected was you to tell me that that's one of the comics that Aces Weekly carries. That's great to hear, Scott. That's wonderful. Well, when the physical book comes out, you got to come back because I really want to do it justice. And then,
and I've got a whole lot of projects going on now that you'll like to hear about too, I have to say.
All right. Well, we could save it for another conversation.
Yeah,
Scott, as always, seriously, man, I hope this gives you that same vibe when you see Rich Coase talking to somebody and it's like, oh man, these guys, they like the same shit I like because clearly we're cut from the same cloth.
Exactly.
And I love it.
Yeah. We need to hang out more. Just get me to Chicago or get you to LA.
Get me to LA 100%. Good Lord, man. Absolutely. No, and I'm really glad. Congratulations. I'm glad you're mobile again and you're able to get around on your own. That's a huge difference. I had a leg injury infection that kept me off my feet for 5 weeks. And even after that, they really limited my walking. And finally, when they allowed me to walk again, COVID broke. And so we were all in lockdown. So so believe me, I in a small way, I sympathize. And and also knowing how great, because I spent 5 weeks in the hospital with this leg infection. They had to keep giving operations to get rid of it and stuff. And the nurses were just my best friends. And thank God. Because they really, and they work their asses off. So that's really great.
Well, the thing is in a hospital, so many people are worried that they're going to die. They're just obsessing on themselves. But if you know that this is something that you'll get out of, you can be yourself. And the nurses and doctors naturally are attracted to people that kind of are thinking outside their own head,
Yes. No, they were tremendous. The entire medical staff was great to me. And it sounds like you had the same experience. So no, that's wonderful, dude. Well, again, here, let me bring up the cover again because it's available now, everybody, and it's out. You can find it at Comix, your smarter comic stores, and of course, you can order it through Amazon. Scott Shaw's Comics and Stories,
and it's a big
giant
book too. It's so over 300 pages.
That's literally what I was saying. A giant book, fantastic, great stuff. It runs the gamut of wonderful spot illustrations, like these great images that Scott did for San Diego Comic-Con, to fantastic stories and one-page vignettes that I've enjoyed over the years, and of course, you get to see some of your favorite characters, like Captain Carrot and some of Scott's other original ideas, and callbacks to things like Ed Grimley and Camp Candy and The Simpsons and the Flintstones and Sonic, even down there. So there's Sonic. So way to go.
Like to tell people it's the perfect bathroom book.
It is.
There's no story in there that you can't read in 10 minutes, the whole thing in 10 minutes.
It's very true. Very true. Thanks, man. Great talking to you. And truly, a couple months, whenever the nurse book is ready, please come back.
All right. Great Excellent. To see you as always.
Thank you, man. Hey, listen, everybody, stick around on the YouTube channel because in about a half hour, I'll be talking to Cully Hamner, the co-creator of the Jaime Hernandez Blue Beetle, and the original story that inspired the two movies Red, the Bruce Willis films that were interesting films of its time, And we'll talk about that and a whole lot more with Cully at the bottom of the hour. So I hope you'll join us. Until then, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.